With the North Shore Drive podcast being back here in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, we got to talk some Steelers football. And it's week one. What better time to do it? I'm your host, Chris Carter. We got Ray Fittipaldo coming on the show today. We're going to get things talking about the quarterback situation, stuff about what to expect this week, offensive line struggles, so many different topics right here on the North Shore Drive podcast of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Let's have a fun show, everyone. Hope you're going to have a happy Monday.
You are now listening to the North Shore Drive podcast, a show on all things Pittsburgh sports from the writers of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, hosted by Christopher Carter.
And I'm Chris Carter here from the North Shore Drive podcast. It's the Monday episode. We're back here. We got a familiar face for all you guys, all the time. I'm the new guy around here. What am I saying? We got Ray Fittipaldo, long-time beat reporter for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. He's been covering the Pittsburgh Steelers. Ray, how are you doing, sir?
Excellent, Chris. How are you, man? Good to be with you.
Same here. Good to be with you. We always make the joke whenever we get to St. Vincent College or to training camp, whenever because it's been a few different places the last few years. They're like, oh, man, the summer went away. But now it's like the summer is really legitimately gone. The fall's about to be here, even though it's hot as all get out. And the Steelers are about to play some actual football that counts. But, Ray, nationally, there seems to still be this question: who's going to start, Mitch Trubisky or Kenny Pickett? But Ray, I know, everyone knows it's going to be Mitch Trubisky, at least for the start to start the year, maybe the whole year. Am I missing something? Is there some element that I'm just thinking like that I could be completely throwing out there, even though Mike Tomlin says he hasn't said it, but we know who they're picking?
Yeah, I mean, listen, here's the deal with Mitch Trubisky, Chris. He can be a good bridge quarterback for the Steelers, but that's what he is. He's a bridge quarterback, and we knew that from the very day that the Steelers drafted Kenny Pickett in late April, right? So Mitch went through OTAs and minicamp, taking all the reps with the ones. That didn't really change at all during training camp. I think Kenny maybe got a couple of series with the ones. I mean, Mason might have as well, but 95% of the snaps up at Latrobe and then back at the South Side, they were taken by Mitch Trubisky. So the only reason it's really a topic for the last week or two is because Kenny Pickett got better and better as camp went along. And for whatever reason, Mike Tomlin didn't want to acknowledge who the starter was going to be. He might do that Monday. He might do that Tuesday. Knowing Mike Tomlin, he might do it Friday. He might have some fun with the people in Cincinnati. But we all know it's going to be Mitch. For how long? That's the big question, right?
Right.
Is it going to be in October? Is it going to be in November? Is it going to be in September of 2023? That's the only question that's out there right now, Chris.
I think that's the main question, right? Because Kenny Pickett, there is a confidence about him. They do like him, and we've seen it. And there's reasons to like him. He's been successful so far in the preseason. I'd say he's checked all those boxes. But Mitch, again, is the guy. He's been through the NFL week. I think people forget there is a certain grind to the NFL of, 1 week you play a team, and as soon as you're done playing that team, you got to gear up for the next team, and you got to get ready for how that next team is going to use your prior tape against you in this upcoming week. And that's something that, it takes time to adjust to for everyone. Not everybody just jumps into the NFL and has instant success. And, a lot of people out there are still saying, oh, well, if they draft in the first round, shouldn't they, make him start right away? Isn't this a waste of time? Meanwhile, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Aaron Rodgers, all those guys, they had to wait their turn to get to become a starter. They didn't either do it until their second year or late their first year. So I thought that's ridiculous. But focusing on Mitch Trubisky, Ray, is he ready to kind of run the offense? This Bengals defense that they're going to face, this Bengals defense beat Patrick Mahomes twice last year. Granted, one of those games was with Jamar Chase having like a career day in the regular season, but especially in that playoff game, they confused them. They confused him. They were able to keep him at bay. They did not let the Chiefs offense explode. And that's the Chiefs offense that ripped the Steelers defense apart in the playoffs. Is Mitch Trubisky about to be in over his head, or do you think he's in a good place heading into the season?
I think Mitch is in a good place, but I can't tell you that Matt Cannon's offense and that running game or that pass protection is in a good place. And I mean, let's face it, that's going to play into how we view Mitch Trubisky, right? I mean, you can't you can't talk about the quarterback without talking about the offensive line in the running game and the whole shebang too. So, I mean, my level of confidence in Mitch Trubisky based off of what I saw in training camp, pretty good, right? He had a couple of rough days in training camp, couple, days where he had some picks and all that stuff. But as he went through the preseason, no picks in the 3 preseason games, did pretty much everything they asked him to do, oftentimes under duress because that offensive line played so poorly. So, yeah, I mean, I think, Mitch has what it takes to run a successful offense because, number one, he's got a good defense behind him, right? That's the main thing. He's got to be a game manager. They're not going to ask him to go out there and be Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes. He's a guy who's going to know what his role is. But the question is, Chris, do they have the offensive line to execute that? Based on what I saw in the preseason, I'd say no. Do they have the running game? They got Najee Harris. He's pretty good, but the running game wasn't all that great with Najee Harris last year. It was more he accumulated yards because he got so many carries. So I like Mitch Trubisky. I like Kenny Pickett. I like their skill possession guys. From running backs to tight ends to receivers, I just don't like the offensive line.
I feel you. And we'll get to the offensive line shortly here because they are a big component of this offense. But you said about those skill position players and something that I've looked at, we saw the Bengals. They went to the Super Bowl last year with a not good offensive line, a very good quarterback, and very talented skill position players. I'm not saying the Steelers are at that level. But I want to ask you, do you see those skill position players as deep enough and talented enough to win them enough games for this to be a competitive season with the offense?
Yes. Let's go through it. I think Najee Harris is the real deal. He just can't get hit behind the line of scrimmage like he was last season.
Yep.
And he's got to have some daylight. If he's got daylight, Chris, I view him as one of the top 10 running backs in the league when you take the whole picture, right? What he could do blocking, what he could do running, what he could do receiving. Let's go to Pat Freiermuth and the tight ends. And let's just stay on Pat because he's the starter. Again, I think he's a top 10 to 12 tight end in this league when you look at his total package. We saw what he could do in the red zone last year, right? 7 touchdowns, very dangerous weapon there. They want to add stuff to his resume this year. They want to add him running down the seam in the middle of the field. Use him a little bit more where he can help you and not just limit him to being a red zone target. And then when you look at the receivers, Deontay Johnson, really, really solid. I look at him as a top 20 receiver in this game, and they paid him as such. George Pickens, I think, I'm not going to sit here and tell you he's got a chance to be Jamar Chase this year, but he's got Jamar Chase-like qualities in his game. And if everything is right around him, he could turn into that guy. And then you got Chase Claypool, Gunnar Olszewski. I mean, we don't really know what to expect from Chase, right? I mean, he's
been up and down.
A guy who's up and down, but I just rattled off 4 guys before I even got to Chase Claypool, who people think Chase Claypool can be pretty good if he ever gets his head on straight. We'll see if that happens this year, but yeah, I mean, I think the skill position players, I think it's a formidable group. Now, it doesn't compare to the Bengals. I'm not going to tell you it compares to the Chiefs or any of those other teams, but I think when you just look at the skill guys, they got a chance to be top half in the league overall when you look at all 32 teams, I think.
Certainly. I do think there's a possibility there. We got to look at that offensive line, though. And you wrote a very interesting piece at the end of last week talking about the tackle position specifically. I want to get to that piece in just a minute here on the North Shore Drive podcast brought to you from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. But first, we gotta talk to you guys because I think we have some really cool ads coming out. And one of them is from MyBookie. As the Bills and the Rams prepare to kick off the NFL regular season, now is the time to prepare your winning season at MyBookie. Whether you're a veteran bettor or a first timer, MyBookie gets you the most for your money with a double deposit bonus. It's quick and easy. A $250 deposit can become a $500 deposit in your account. And You can use your funds to bet instantly on as many games, contests, and prop bets that you want. To claim your bonus, register today and use the promo code NSD. That's NSD, just like for the North Shore Drive. Designed to add more excitement to the games and sports you love. That's what MyBookie does at all times. Bet on teams' win totals, predict the Super Bowl winner, or use the MyBookie prop builder and secure the bag. Your winning season begins today exclusively at MyBookie. Back here on the North Shore Drive podcast, I'm Chris Carter. He's Ray Fittipaldo. We're both of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. We want to get you guys, we want to set the tone for the week going into the week one of the season. And often the tone setters for NFL teams are the offensive line. You know, teams say the team goes as the offensive line goes. Well, as Ray and I were alluding to in the last segment, if the team goes as the offensive line goes, it's going to be a rough season for the Pittsburgh Steelers. But Ray, before we talk about all the positions on the offensive line, I want to focus on the tackle position. You were talking about Chukwuma Okorafor and how he might actually be a better fit at left tackle. I thought this for years. He's not the aggressive run blocking right tackle that Marcus Gilbert was for many years for the Steelers. I always see him as a better pass protector. Why is it that they won't rotate him over there? Because I think Dan Moore Jr., if you took the left tackle responsibility and say, hey, you're right tackle, go be aggressive, I actually think that would play to his strengths. What are the Steelers seeing that we're not?
Yeah, so listen, a little bit of background. Just normally the way most NFL teams do things, your best pass protector is on the left side to protect the blind side for your right-handed quarterback, and your best run-blocking tackle generally is your right tackle because most teams like to be run-heavy on the right-hand side of the line. That's the way it's been for years. Most teams still follow that recipe to some degree. Now, when you look at the Steelers, they tried Okorafor at left tackle for 3 weeks last summer. We never really did get an explanation why they made that move to go with rookie Dan Moore and then to put Chooks on the right side and Dan Moore on the left side. We still haven't really received a good explanation from the coaching staff going into this season. And Chris, it's become a big topic here based on the way Dan Moore has protected the passer over the first 3 preseason games. So I wrote about it this week. If you go back and look at Chooks's PFF profile from last preseason, it's not as bad as Dan Moore's. I'm not telling you he was perfect last summer, but it's not as bad as Dan Moore's is this year. So, Chris, if they were going to do it, they would have made that switch last week when they had practice. They would have given themselves 2 weeks, to get that situated. They're not going to do it now. I did find it interesting when I asked Matt Canada the question last week. I did find it interesting that he doesn't want to limit Chooks. He doesn't think he's just a right tackle. He just said, for right now, we believe this is the best 5 with Chooks on the left and Dan Moore on the right. But he didn't close the door on maybe Chooks making that move at some point down the road. So we don't have a good answer as to why Dan is still on the left and Chooks is on the right, but we kind of know that it's still something in the offing that could take place, especially if Dan Moore continues to struggle.
If Dan Moore struggles, I mean, you're going to have a lot of problems for young quarterbacks. Now, granted, this isn't Ben Roethlisberger. Each of these guys, Mitch Trubisky, Kenny Pickett, even Mason Rudolph, they can get out of danger better than Ben Roethlisberger could last year. Now, of course, prime Ben, different story, but there might be more of a saving grace because last year, if Dan Moore Jr. gave pressure off the edge, it was just that play was going to most likely be dead. But this year, maybe there's a saving grace this year. But I look at the situation and I say, man, in camp, I personally, you and I were watching practice. I thought with the first few weeks of camp when they put the pads on, I was like, hey, there looks like there could be some progress here with Dan Moore Jr. And then the first preseason game, there were some up and downs, like there were some bad plays, but some good plays. And then the second and third preseason games, it looked like he just fell off a cliff. Is the left tackle position too much for Dan Moore? Is this a thing where he's doomed to be like this? Or do you think there's something there that they can pull out of him to make him a decent, even just an acceptable left tackle?
See, Mike Tomlin really likes his toughness. He's mentioned that more for a year now. I can go back and produce sound for you last summer at training camp where he just liked his mentality, the fact that he didn't back down as a rookie. And they really like that about him. Now, is that enough to make him a left tackle?
Right.
Or a good one in the NFL? I don't know. The one thing they didn't do a lot of, Chris, in the preseason, and I think maybe this was by design, they kind of wanted to see how all those guys would hold up. Not a lot of tight end chipping, not a lot of running back chipping, right? So they do have a plan B once they get to the regular season. If they're facing, let's say, a Myles Garrett, right?
Right.
Okay, we're going to keep Zach Gentry in. We're going to double team him, and then we're going to hope these other four figure it out. Okay, but if we want Zach Gentry to run a pattern, we're going to have Najee come over, and Najee's going to chip before he goes out into his route. So there are things that they could do that I don't think they necessarily did much of in the preseason. I think that could help Dan out, but asking him to fix, the obvious mistakes, let's say, in his pass protection, that's a big ask in just 2 weeks' time. If you noticed, a lot of his pressure was to the outside. Pass rushers were getting to his outside shoulder, quick pressure to the outside. So it seems like he's afraid to get beat to the inside. Okay, so maybe he's got to make an adjustment. I just don't know if that adjustment can be made in just 2 weeks' time. We'll see how it goes.
We will see, because the Bengals will try to get after them. They will try to expose it. They have some good pass rushers, Trey Hendrickson, what you want to do. But I want to ask you about, continuing with the offensive line before we roll into our final segment here. But is James Daniels going to be the guy that kind of holds the group up? Because this was different than Trey Turner. Trey Turner last year was an emergency signing when David DeCastro was like, oh, wait, he's not going to be ready. Okay, just grab whoever you can, plug him in, and hope that the veteran can hold him up. But James Daniels was signed like early in free agency to be the guy that could, he was a second-round pick by the Bears. Bears fans were very sad to see him go. And there was hope that he could be the guy that sort of set the tone. And you and I, we talked to the offensive lineman. A lot of them pointed to him as the leader of the group. But he didn't have that great of a preseason either. Now, he didn't have a Dan Moore type of preseason. But I thought there was supposed to be more there. Is this something that we need to wait to see develop, or is there some fool's gold with the James Daniels situation?
No, I think there's enough of a pedigree with James Daniels being a former number 39 overall pick that he is going to figure it out, and he's going to play like he's worth $8 million a season. We didn't see that in the preseason. And I think what's going on, I've talked to every single offensive line about this, Chris. For James Daniels, Pat Meyer is his third offensive line coach in 5 years. Chooks has 5 in 5 years.
He does.
I talked to Joe Haig last week before he was cut. He's had 6 in 6 years. Now it's going to be 6. Now it's going to be 7 in 6 years because he just got signed by the Browns.
Yeah.
So all of these Steelers linemen, all of them, every single one of them, have had multiple coaches over their short career span. So I'm not laying any of the blame here at Pat Meyer. He's going to come in. He's going to teach his techniques. He's going to try to get things done his way. That's why they hired him, right? You got to give him time. You got to give him time for him to get his program into place. But I think what you see with James, and I think you see this with every lineman on that line right now, they're struggling just a little bit with their technique, new way of doing things. I talked to Kevin about this, Kevin Dotson specifically about this issue. And Kevin told me he finds himself falling back on old principles and old techniques that his previous coaches taught him. It's a tough thing when you have like a revolving door at offensive line coach, the way the Steelers have the last couple of years. You have to try to get it right, number one, which is what they hope they did with Pat Meyer. But you also have to give it time. Now, Mike Tomlin said last week, we better win games while doing it. But believe me, there are still some issues with technique, just with the whole operation of how they're doing things. So I've got confidence in James Daniel. I think he'll eventually figure it out. But this is not just a problem for James Daniels. It's a problem for Mason Cole. It's a problem for Chooks. It's a problem for all these guys.
Yeah, I agree. And before we move on, I do want to make one quick point. All the Steelers fans I saw in every preseason game, oh, man, that Pat Meyer, he's a terrible offensive line coach. He can't get these guys together. And I'm like, geez, can you give a guy more than like a couple of weeks to figure something? This one, he has no first-round draft picks on this squad. They haven't had the investment that Mike Munchak had, because that's what everyone's – if you're not Mike Munchak in week one of the preseason, then you're a terrible offensive line coach to a lot of Steelers fans. But this is why you take your time. This is why you're supposed to exhibit patience. This is why you listen to us as reporters, people who are there all the time, because we are the ones that kind of trade. And Ray, you've seen this offensive line grow. You've seen what it was. Mike Munchak had David DeCastro, Marquise Pouncey, Marcus Gilbert, guys who could be anchors for an offensive line that, yes, had undrafted guys like Villanueva, like Ramon Foster, seventh-round guys like Kelvin Beachum come in and have success. But it was built on pillar guys, and that's what Pat Meyer doesn't have just yet. I agree with you. People need to give him time. We want to talk some defense on this show. We will do that in just a moment here. But first, we got to talk to you guys because, hey, Yinzers, listen up. The Steelers campaign is ready to roll. So show your support for our black and gold. It's easy with 2 legendary shops in the Strip District, plus our growing online store. Yinzers in the Berg is the place to go for Pittsburgh sports apparel, accessories, and much, much more. We'll see you in the Strip District or check them out online at shopyinzerspgh.com. That's yinzerspgh.com. Do check them out. They have great apparel to get you ready for Steelers season. Week 1's here. Get your new gear at yinzerspgh.com or check their place out in the Strip District. Back here on the North Shore Drive podcast, I'm Chris Carter. He's Ray Fittipaldo. We're going to wrap up the show today talking a little bit about the defense. And Ray, I wanted to focus on an aspect that I thought there was something very interesting brewing there at the end of the preseason where we saw the Steelers safeties rotating a lot. We saw Minkah Fitzpatrick always in there. Terrell Edmonds usually in there. But DeMonte KZ was giving them this 3 safety look that we saw. Sometimes Fitzpatrick would fly down in the box. Sometimes he was blitzing. Sometimes Terrell Edmonds, that's where he plays the best is in the box. But KZ, Edmonds, and Fitzpatrick all were going deep at times. And when I was looking at that, I was getting excited because I'm like, man, that's the kind of stuff that I think Terrell Austin has always wanted to do with his secondary, but couldn't because he wasn't a defensive coordinator. And now he has a chance. But as fate would have it, DeMonte KZ suffers an injury. Looks like he'll be out at least until week 4. We'll see how that plays out. Is that a big detriment to the Steelers defense, or is that kind of just like hey, there's still a lot of strength to this unit, and that's just a facet that will have to come later in the season?
Yeah, Austin was asked about that last week, and KZ's absence isn't going to deter him from using that package. Now, is it going to be as good with Marcus Allen in it or Trey Norwood? I mean, they got to figure that out over the next couple of weeks. If you look at it, the way they were using KZ, probably the hint is probably Allen will be the better fit there because he could stop the run. He's former safety. When I look at Trey Norwood, I think he's a really good player. I think he's better when he's sitting back in zone coverage.
I agree.
Not necessarily a stout run defender. I think he's going to be very useful in sub packages once again, but I think you got to pick your spots with him. And I don't think they necessarily want him to put him into a KZ role to see if he sinks or swims. So I think Allen is probably that guy. You saw they brought him back to the 53-man roster after they cut him. So I think the hope is they can get by for, 6-8 weeks. I think mid-October is probably kind of the target range for KZ coming back. He's on IR, so he can't play for the first 4 games. So they can get him back by mid-October and they can recreate what we saw with him in the preseason. I think they'll be in good shape, but they got to win games with Marcus Allen and or Trey Norwood or someone else in there in the immediate future.
Right. And I think they're confident in Trey Norwood that he's on the right trajectory. Because, again, he's a 7th-round pick. Last year, he was playing a lot more snaps than I think most 7th-round pick safeties would. But like you said, in the preseason, there were sometimes he made some good hits, but I don't think we could both agree. He's not at the level where KZ, a guy who's led the NFL in interceptions before, a guy who's had several years of experience, who knows how to play underneath and play over top and play within a veteran scheme. I do agree they're going to try to do that, but like you said, it's not going to be as smooth. And even like Marcus Allen, box safety that's converted to linebacker who can kind of do both. There's a reason Marcus Allen's around. I think he does bring energy. Yes, and people they know they Chico and all the hype that he is the team's hype man. He gets really excited, but his athleticism in the box, that's where they kind of want him. But I think the one thing that could bite back against them, and it's sort of what you said about how they'll manage until KZ comes back and this group can be at full strength. But if Marcus Allen ever has to cover deep, as DeMonte KZ could cover deep, I think this defense is in a lot of like that. That would be a thing. Like if I'm a quarterback, if I'm Joe Burrow and I see Marcus Allen dropping back into a deep half coverage, I'm like, oh, that's where we're going, Jamar. We're going right after that guy.
Yeah, they could pick and choose how they deploy those packages, when they deploy those packages. Let's face it, against a team like the Bengals in week 1, you might want to have Trey Norwood playing more, not necessarily in those 3 safety packages, just playing more basic dime because they are so prolific with Jamar Chase and with all those other great skill guys that they have. So, I mean, I think they're going to find ways to use it. It may not be as prevalent as it was going to be with KZ, but Austin didn't back down. Austin said, we're going to play our defense the way we want to play it. And there was no knock against KZ. I just got a feeling they want KZ back ASAP because it just felt like they had something special brewing when he was in on those sub packages.
What's your read on Terrell Austin as a defensive coordinator? I mean, it's tough because he just started, but I watched his days from the Lions. It seems like, being a defensive backs coach, he might have a different philosophy of how to create turnovers, or am I reading too much into that? Is this going to be just a very similar Steelers defense with some tweaks in it that it has been under Keith Butler and Dick LeBeau over the past several years? Or are we about to see something that is unique we're going to say, well, this is the Terrell Austin defense?
Yeah, I don't think you're going to see a Terrell Austin defense. I think you'll see a Pittsburgh Steelers defense with some Terrell Austin sprinkled in, with some Brian Flores sprinkled in, and then the typical, we know Mike's kind of been in charge
we know
for the last couple of years, and he's certainly going to have his say in well. But people talk about, well, there might be too many cooks in the kitchen. I don't know. Let's wait to see how it plays out. I mean, last year we all kind of know there were some struggles because of the injuries, because the run defense was bad. I want to see what this defense looks like when Minka can be Minka and he can sit back and play where he wants to play. You can still do some different things with him, bring him up in the box every once in a while, but put him back deep where he's most successful. I want to see him back to 2019-20 Minka. And to do that, Tyson Alulu has to stay healthy. Larry Ogunjobi has to stay healthy. They got to be the stout run stoppers up front so they can sort of sit back and sort of, peel their ears back and rush the passer in those second and third and long situations. So I think this defense can be really good. I think Minka is going to be a big part of that. But to me, they got to get back to using him the way they did 2 and 3 years ago. And they don't need him making 120, 130 tackles, whatever he did last year.
Yeah, I mean, like last year, a lot of people were knocking him, but I'm like, the guy had the most tackles by a defensive back in Steelers history last year. It's clear he's willing to do whatever it takes, but you don't want him to do whatever it takes needs to be back there where he's making 4 or 5 interceptions a year and being a huge problem for people in the pass game. I agree with you entirely of that. But I want to ask before we go, not just the defensive line, but the linebackers play a factor into that too. Are the linebackers going to be good enough to allow? Because I think that was also part of the problem last year was, Devin Bush wasn't the early Devin Bush that we saw in his rookie and second year before he got hurt. And Joe Schobert was very meh. But Myles Jack has been solid. I think that he's looked really good in training camp. I think we saw some glimpses of Devin Bush maybe getting better in that last preseason game. Are the linebackers going to be good enough so that Minkah Fitzpatrick doesn't have to come up and support as much as he did last year?
I think Myles Jack is going to be an above-average starter for the Steelers. I believe that. I've talked to some people down in Jacksonville. I mean, we all know Jaguars fans were a little bit surprised when that happened. And when I talk to people down there, it's more like, hey, I think that guy's still got some juice left, and that might be a good pickup for the Steelers. So I think cautious optimism there with Myles Jack. I think he'll be heads and shoulders above what they had last year at that position. But then there's still a big question mark about what are you going to get out of Devin Bush?
Yep.
Robert Spillane. Hey, eventually, by midseason, maybe Mark Robinson will be in that equation.
Whoa, Mark Robinson.
That's the big unknown, right? We don't know what you're going to get out of that other inside linebacker spot. So for me, we saw some baby steps with Devin Bush. I'm not going to jump to conclusions and think he's going to get back to, where he was in 2019 or anything like that, but that's still a big concern, and they got to figure that out. They have options. If Devin doesn't work out, they got Spillane. If Spillane doesn't work out, they love Mark Robinson, what he can do. They don't want to rush that, but they do have options. We're going to find out if any of those options are any good if Devin Bush does fit.
We'll certainly will find out. That's a big part of this Steelers season. Hey, week 1's here. We'll get our first test on Sunday. Ray Fittipaldo will be there in Cincinnati covering it. And we're not done this week. We got 2 more episodes coming up Wednesday and Friday here on the North Shore Drive podcast. We'll be talking with Jason Mackey on Wednesday. We'll be talking about giving you a preview of the Steelers on Friday. We'll keep you up to date with all those things right here on the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette's Sports Now YouTube page. Subscribe. You see the link above me. You can subscribe to us, get all of our daily updates here. Or if you're listening to us on our audio platforms, subscribe there. We're going to have new content, new shows coming to you all week long, getting you ready here. Thanks so much for tuning in to us. Ray, thanks so much for joining me on this show. It's fun. Let people know what you got going this week for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette.
Yeah, I'll be down there every day this week, starting Monday on Labor Day. So lots of things to watch out for. It's Bengals week. They're the AFC defending champions. So it should be a fun week as we get ready to drive off to Cincy.
Absolutely. It should be a fun week. He's Ray Fittipaldo. I'm Chris Carter. We're both of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Go to post-gazette.com right now. Get your subscription and get all of this great written content on our website and in our paper. We'll be back more this week with the North Shore Drive podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Have a great Monday, everyone.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the North Shore Drive podcast of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. If you're watching this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our YouTube channel. For 6 months of digital access to post-gazette.com for just $6, click the link down below in the description.